Once again, the supporter base proved its capacity to drive results. Through relentless streaming, vocal advocacy, and promotional efforts, they transformed what could have been a routine event into a defining moment for international positioning. This strengthens the group's foothold in the US market and signals that their breakout is not a future projection. It is happening now. Should this velocity continue, this achievement may be remembered as the inflection point where the group transitioned from being Asia's pride to becoming a worldwide force. Returning to the earlier point regarding the myth versus reality, there is a widespread belief that SB19 succeeded because the industry finally decided to accept them. This is the headline narrative preferred by media outlets. But insiders suggest a different dynamic. They argue that the industry did not open the door. The group forced it open. That changes the calculation entirely. In the traditional music ecosystem, especially within the US, breaking through typically manifests with specific resources. Major label financing, radio rotation, strategic networking, and heavy media coverage form the standard path. SB19 operated with minimal access to these tools initially. Their ability to succeed without them challenges the assumption that these resources are mandatory for success. The engine behind this operation remains the supporters. They acted as a decentralized marketing agency. Coordinated streaming ensures that numbers reflect genuine interest rather than passive listening. Viral campaigns create organic visibility where paid advertising might fail. Chart tracking proves longevity beyond a one-week spike. This was not random popularity. You recognize the magnitude of the shift. This warrants support for the channel through engagement and subscription. More deep dives into industry shifts and artist trajectories are planned for upcoming content. Here lies the final synthesis of the situation. SB19 did not enter the United States market through the conventional channels of acceptance. They did not wait for inclusion. They did not follow the established roadmap. They rewrote the parameters. Currently, the international market is not questioning their eligibility. The focus has shifted to how quickly other entities can adapt to compete. This raises the possibility that this current phase is not the apex of their growth. Recent accolades serve as proof of concept rather than the finish line. SB19 recently secured the prestigious Silver Champion title for P-Pop Star of the Year at the 6th Tag Victorious Awards held in Chicago. This moment generated significant reaction among both the fandom and industry insiders. Winning this specific category is more than acquiring a physical object. It serves as a statement regarding the status of Pablo, Josh Cullen, Stel Agiro, Ken, and Justin Dios. They are no longer classified merely as emerging talent. They are certified contenders on the global stage. They represent not only their individual artistry, but the entirety of the P-pop movement in a space where visibility determines viability. As their name resonated through the venue and the audience reacted, the implication became clear. This was not simply about recognition of skill. It was about the validation of years of labor, resilience, and commitment to their craft. It demonstrates to the market that P-pop can stand competitively alongside dominant genres such as K-pop. However, we must look past the successes to understand the friction encountered along the way. Realistically, this section of the story is not always highlighted in press releases. Market observers admit that the group faced significant headwinds. They encountered limitations in industry infrastructure, a noticeable lack of early Western support structures, and inherent skepticism toward the P-pop genre itself. There were gates that remained shut, opportunities that required disproportionate effort to access, and moments where resilience was tested. Many artists in similar positions might have concluded the endeavor was unsustainable. SB19 continued building regardless. This is the uncomfortable reality of their rise. They did not succeed because the system aided them. They succeeded despite the constraints of the system. This persistence forces a reevaluation of the current market dynamics, which leads to the essential inquiry: what constitutes their specific competitive advantage? Why this group? Why at this specific moment? Breaking down the methodology reveals 5 critical pillars identified by observers. First, discipline. Years of rigorous training resulted in precision and consistency that is evident in performance. Second, strategy. Every move, from audio production to visual design, carries specific intent rather than being reactive. Third, fan power. The supporters function as organizers and promoters, creating a multiplier effect on all initiatives. Fourth, authenticity. They did not erase their cultural identity to appeal to a broader demographic. They amplified it, turning difference into value. Fifth, control. Owning the direction of their career altered their trajectory significantly, allowing them to pivot quickly without bureaucratic delays. Combining these elements yields more than temporary success. It generates momentum, and momentum, once achieved at a global scale, becomes a self-sustaining force. If you have followed this analysis to the end, and expand globally without seeking external approval. To be precise, they ceased waiting for permission. In an industry where creative output is often dictated by contractual obligations, this level of independence is a powerful lever. Analysts point to this autonomy as a primary driver for their accelerated international expansion. They were not bound by the bureaucratic friction of the traditional system. They moved around it, navigating pathways that others found blocked. Yet, despite this structural advantage, there remained a singular catalyst that propelled them into wider conversation. One specific release pushed them into the center of global dialogue. Let us examine the impact of the single titled Gento. On the surface, it appears to be another viral sensation. However, industry analysis suggests the outcome was designed, not accidental. It was not manufactured hype, nor was it forced momentum. It was engineered to achieve maximum resonance. Here is the breakdown of the execution. Catchy, repeatable choreography, strong visual branding, and perfect timing relative to social media algorithms. When the release occurred, all variables aligned. Supporters amplified the content, platform algorithms prioritized the visibility, and new audiences engaged with the material. Suddenly, the group transcended the status of a musical act. They became a topic of conversation across borders. That is the distinction between a commercial song and a cultural moment. Gento served as the confirmation that their approach worked. It validated the strategy of maintaining artistic integrity while engaging digital platforms aggressively. SB19 managed to overcome this hurdle. Let us address the issue of cultural identity. When artists attempt to penetrate the United States, there is immense pressure to adapt. The expectation often involves altering their sonic signature, adjusting their aesthetic presentation, increasing English language usage, or conforming to prevailing Western trends. SB19 did not adhere to this pressure. Instead, they executed a high-risk strategy. They maintained their original identity. Filipino cultural markers, a blended genre sound, and distinct visual styling remained central to their presentation. Industry insiders suggest that this adherence to authenticity was precisely what differentiated them in a crowded marketplace. Consider the economics of attention. Why would a listener invest in another derivative act when the market offers something genuinely original? SB19 did not attempt to become a variation of an existing successful group. They became the primary version of themselves. This stance creates a unique value proposition that cannot be replicated. Now, we arrive at the structural decision that redefined their potential. This is the aspect where seasoned industry professionals pay the closest attention. It is the factor that separates independent groups from dependent assets. At a critical juncture, the group made a choice that many artists hesitate to make. They assumed control of their trajectory. Rather than relying entirely on traditional management frameworks, they constructed their own operational structure. This shift changed the game fundamentally. Why? Because autonomy granted them the authority to dictate their sound, manage their brand image, select collaborations. They operated without the safety net of Western corporate backing. So, the question becomes, how did a group without institutional support secure a foothold in one of the most competitive music markets in the world? For those following this trajectory, whether part of the dedicated supporter base or newly observing the phenomenon, the answer lies in the mechanics of their growth. If you value understanding the business behind the music, engage with this discussion. It highlights the strength of modern community organization. Here is the first verified truth accepted by market analysts. SB19 did not ascend because the existing system accommodated them. They rose because their support network functioned as a highly efficient distribution engine. We are discussing a global digital cohort operating with the precision of a promotional firm. This involved coordinated streaming initiatives, viral hashtag implementation, rigorous chart tracking, and real-time cross-platform promotion. This activity was not spontaneous. It was strategic execution at a community level. When initial traction began gaining momentum internationally, it was not driven by terrestrial radio stations selecting them for rotation. It was driven by supporters making their metrics impossible to overlook. Every trend, every statistical spike, every chart placement was amplified through deliberate action. There is a nuance here that is frequently overlooked. The United States market did not discover SB19 organically. The digital infrastructure delivered them to the region first. That is a fundamentally different pathway compared to historical export models. However, audience mobilization alone does not guarantee sustained relevance. Even with significant fan-driven energy, there remains a critical barrier that stops most artists from achieving global stability. Something typically prevents crossover into the mainstream consciousness without assimilation. No press briefing prepared the market for this shift. No trade publication predicted the exact trajectory of the ascent. But now, clear evidence exists of a fundamental recalibration in how the American music landscape perceives Philippine pop. What unfolded recently in Chicago was not merely an award ceremony appearance. It was a declaration that disrupted established norms regarding international expansion. Witnessed by industry observers who rarely validate regional acts outside of specific quotas, this event signaled recognition beyond mere novelty. So, what does this validation mean for the broader ecosystem? And why is this development sending ripples through negotiation rooms? A quick reminder: if you value narratives backed by verifiable industry movement rather than surface-level trends, consider supporting this channel. We do not chase noise. We analyze the mechanics that drive sustainable careers. Audience enthusiasm is a valuable resource, but it is not the only variable in a successful equation. In the global music economy, longevity is not determined by trending topics alone. It is secured when structural gatekeepers acknowledge viability. That is the significance of this disclosure. When we examine the current status of SB19, specifically their presence in the United States, there exists a persistent misconception that requires dismantling. The prevailing narrative suggests that their access to American markets was facilitated by hidden machinery. The assumption is that a major conglomerate secretly positioned them for dominance, providing the necessary infrastructure to bypass traditional barriers. Insiders, however, are reporting a divergent reality. They indicate that the industry did not voluntarily grant entry. SB19 compelled access through sheer execution and strategic autonomy. This distinction alters the entire understanding of their position.